Welcome to K-Drama School. I'm your host, Grace Jung, and class is now in session. Today we're going to talk about the show Kingdom, which is a Korean zombie period piece set during the Joseon dynasty. And I'm not exactly sure what century we're in. It could be anywhere between the late 14th century to the late 19th century because that's how long the Joseon dynasty reigned for. Kingdom is one of the few Korean TV shows that is exclusively available only on Netflix, meaning it hasn't aired in Korea on a public or commercial broadcaster or on any of its cable channels. Netflix has a hand on Kingdom's production and distribution. The only other Korean drama I can think of that is exclusively Netflix owned is Extracurricular, which is an incredibly stressful show. Kingdom was written by Kim Eun-hee, who's been writing this show since 2011, so that's almost 10 years. Kim Eun-hee's also married to the filmmaker Jang Hang-jun, and he's an indie Korean filmmaker. Kim Eun-hee's success really outdoes Jang's filmmaker success, and what I love about Jang is how whenever he's like doing an interview or something and people are trying to emasculate him by saying like, oh, don't you feel like you're under your wife's shadow or whatever, he always turns it on its head and says how proud he is of his wife's success and how he loves living a lavish life thanks to his wife's success. So like he's one of the few men who doesn't really take this sort of egotistical route with the fact that his wife's career is blossoming so much more than his own. And he's a very supportive husband in that regard. And I really have to hand it to him. Like, Chang he's a good egg. Kim Eun-hee is a highly sought after writer. She's been writing huge TV hits like Signal. She also wrote the show Fandom. She also wrote this show called Jirisan. It's also known as Cliffhanger in English, and that's going to be released sometime this year on TVN. I'm not sure if it'll stream on Netflix or Viki or neither. I'm recording this in February 2021, so I don't know if it'll even be airing by the time this episode of the podcast is released, but it's got huge stars attached to it. Like Chun Ji-hyun is one, Ju Ji-hoon is another, Sung Dong-il is another, and I have high expectations for this show. I want to talk about Ju Ji-hoon a little bit. Ju Ji-hoon, he's the star of Kingdom. He plays the crown prince Yi Chang on the show. I remember seeing Ju Ji-hoon years ago in a really weird romantic comedy called Kung, also known as Princess Hours, starring Yoon Eun-hye. And he played pretty much the same guy. He played like this crown prince on that show, but it was like a modern day Korean monarch kind of TV show. Was very weird. That was back in 2006, and Chu Ji-hoon was very young on that show, and he sucked. He was such a bad actor. He wasn't good looking. I was like, how is this guy the leading man? He is such a bad actor. His face is not that attractive. He's so awkward. Like everything he said and did was extremely awkward on that show. He almost ruined the show for me. But Ju Ji-hoon, like many actors, started out originally as a model. I'm not sure if he was ever trained in acting by any means. Maybe he did, like he took some acting lessons later on. But then Kingdom comes out and he's just blowing me away with his acting on that show. He is so good. So I guess like 15 years of being in show business and starring in multiple TV shows, multiple films, that'll develop some skills for you, I suppose. And not only that, but Chu Ji-hoon's gotten more attractive looking. You know, he filled out and he looks pretty good on the screen. So good for you, Chu Ji-hoon. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of yours. I love Chu Ji-hoon's character. He plays this righteous hero. He's morally upright in midst of this deadly plague that's killing, all the people of the Chosen Kingdom. It's killed his own father. I mean, it's turned his father into a zombie, right? When you read any zombie related scholarly article, they always consider the zombie contagion a metaphor for capitalist greed, corruption, and destruction. And zombie films can also signify, and I quote, cultural anxieties about selfhood, loss of autonomy, and threats of de individualization. And that is a quote from sociologists David Boynes and Robert Wunzer. Hollywood's been making zombie films since the pre-code era. You have White Zombie, which came out in 1932, but the origins of the zombie are actually in Haitian folklore. Okay, so as a concept, the zombie as this monster, it has no origins in Korean folklore or history. I can't think of any Korean folk monsters that bite people and spread disease. You know, like you're just a monster and that's it. Or you're a ghost. There's like a lot of like kishin kind of things in Korea. But the first time I encountered something like a zombie in Korean cinema was in the film The Wailing by Na Hong-jin, which came out in 2016. Na Hong-jin, he's known for, most famously known for the film The Chaser. It plays at Cannes, and it baffles everybody because it's such a weird movie. But I wrote this paper about it a few years ago, and I basically say, like, in The Wailing, there's this scene when the townsmen show up at the Japanese stranger's house. The Japanese stranger is this mysterious like foreigner that the local townspeople in rural Korea, they don't know who the hell he is. And they show up at his house with the intention of murdering him because they think he's the reason why all these people are suddenly dying of plague in the town. But then while they're there to murder this Japanese stranger, they come across a dead man named Park Chun-bae, who's been brought back to life through a shamanistic ritual. Okay, and the townsmen who've never encountered a zombie before, like they don't know what to do with him because they know him, but they also know that he died. But then they're also dealing with him, like walking around and like grabbing them. You know, he's in their face. So and Park Chun-bae is their friend. But Chun-bae isn't exactly himself, right? Like he's making a horrible noise. His face is all like rotting off. He's biting people in the head. So the men initially start beating the shit out of Chun-bae. But a couple of the men try to stop the men from beating up Chun-bae and try reasoning with the zombie. They're like, hey, Chun-bae, don't you know me? Like, what's wrong with you? And of course, they subsequently get attacked by Park Chun-bae because Park Chun-bae is no longer himself. He's this zombie creature, dead guy who's walking around and attacking people for no reason. And I love this scene so much because it represents Korea's unfamiliarity with the zombie as a concept, as a monster, as a creature, as a disease, as whatever. So The Wailing is a really good movie that explores xenophobia in this sense. It conjures the loss of Korea's autonomy via annexation to Japan and to the foreign forces during the Korean War. And I'd say the scene is a jab at Korea's clumsiness and its indigenous means of confronting foreign monsters, be it disease, be it religion, be it technology, be it the people. And it goes so far as to misunderstanding the Western concept of the zombie by trying to help it and trying to reason with it rather than run away from it, right? Before it's too late. The zombie in Korean films and TV also have political and cultural significances tied to what anthropologist Honey Kwon calls the decomposing process. So while you have the physically dead person, right? The decomposition of war trauma in Korea, the fact that many Korean bodies died but did not receive a proper burial or a proper mourning because of war and its wreckage, this continues to plague many Koreans today. The guilt and shame of that, the unknowingness of how these people died, not knowing, not being able to identify faces of piles of bodies or dismembered bodies, which they encountered during the war. The fact that, you know, about 4 million Korean civilians died and they don't know who's what they don't know what the deal is. There's all this mystery and silence that surrounds it. So this decomposition, and I'll quote Kwon, he says the decomposition of the Cold War is the unsettling situation in which the lived reality is not really free from the immediate past and has not reintegrated the past into the time present as a past history. That is, it has a kind of spectral existence. So the Korean zombie, in its physical manifestation of a decomposing body, that is here in front of your face, is a haunting that confronts the living beings in our present-day society with the horrible past. And you see this in The Wailing, and you see this again in Kingdom. The same year that The Wailing hit theaters, Korea released a commercial film that saw huge success called Train to Busan, of course, starring Gong Yoo, Chung Yoo-mi, and Ma Dong-seok. And it's a film that is far less ambivalent about being a zombie concept film. You have all the tropes of a zombie flick where people get bitten, they turn into zombies, and it's all happening on a train that is going from Seoul to Busan. Fun fact, I was born in Busan. Yes, I was. The filmmaker Yeon Sang-ho, who made Train to Busan, he made another zombie film, but an animated version called Seoul Station. And both Train to Busan and Seoul Station are zombie films that have a sharp critique of capitalistic greed, classism, and corruption of the wealthy. Right? So the ending of Train to Busan made it particularly Korean for me because while Chung Yoo-mi's character and Kim Soo-won's character are walking towards the military barracks in Busan, right, which is the coastal tip of the Korean peninsula with its own history attached to the Korean War and being a haven and a port for people to get away, yada, 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 the military men who are armed, right, and they're holding their guns while seeing these two figures walking towards them in the mist and in the dust and in the fog and smoke, they can't tell if these two characters are zombies or humans, right? But the giveaway is when Soo-won's character starts singing in that Aloha Yi song, the Hawaiian song, and then the military men decide not to shoot them because they recognize her human quality and her ability to sing. And this is very, very significant in terms of the Korean War because the Korean War was a civil war, right? I mean, it had a lot of foreign forces attached to it, of course, but it's a war that was mainly triggered by American McCarthyism and the Red Scare and paranoia over communism. And Koreans were attacking and killing one another, suspecting each other of aligning themselves with the other's political ideology, right? So it's like, are you a republic or are you a communist? And there was no way to tell who was a communist or who was a pro-American since everybody was Korean. And that's why the Korean War has this vestige of trauma for Koreans since there was a lot of killing and selling out of friends and neighbors and family, a lot of incestuous tormenting and killing and bombing, etc. So it's an even bigger trauma in that sense. And it was all over some political ideology. So if we go back to The Wailing, that's part of the symptom of the disease that's spreading about town. Once this zombie psychosis kicks into the infected person, that person is no longer themselves. They kill everybody in their closest proximity. That could be their mother, their daughter, their father, their uncle, their neighbor, their best friend. Whoever is near them, they all die. Okay, so in this sense, with Kingdom, the zombie element carries similar significances, but it's for the most part a critique of class issues and corruption of power. So on Kingdom, we find out that 500 Korean soldiers were able to defeat 30,000 Japanese soldiers during the Unpo swamp battle because these soldiers were actually sick people who were poor and destitute. They were dying of illness, but they were, strategically infected with this zombie disease and used in warfare. And I'm like, wow, that is like genius. That's corrupt and fucked up on many levels, but that's genius to infect people and then release them in a battlefield where they are like, they can't be killed, right? Because they're already dead. You see this contagion spreading among the poor again. They were among people who were dying of illness. They were already ill. They were very poor. They didn't have a lot to eat, and they all start dying of. I mean, their disease starts to spread, and they all become zombies after they commit cannibalism, after eating a boy who was attacked by the zombie king, right? And that's how this massive plague starts to take over Joseon. It started with cannibalism, right? And it was out of desperation. It was out of the fact that they were all broke and destitute. Season 1 of this show was directed by Kim Sung-un, who, fun fact, shares the same birthday as I do, and with Rihanna and with Kurt Cobain. Like, what a cool guy. And Kim, he directed a film called A Hard Day that went to Cannes, and that movie starred Lee Sun-gyun and Cho Jin-woong. And that's a pretty good movie. I think it's a pretty good film. I thought it was a very smart move to hire a film director to helm a series like this because, you know, Kingdom, the scale of Kingdom is massive, right? The budget was enormous. It was like nearly $2 million per episode. And yeah, like several people died during the production of this show from overworking. And overworking on film and TV sets is a huge problem in Korea. The overworking is normalized there, and the Korean media industries really need to unionize and set rigid standards in order to protect their workers like they do in Hollywood. Hollywood, it's got its own issues, but they unionized in the 1930s, and you know, things started to get a little bit better since then over the years. Like they're still making adjustments. It's still an uphill battle, but you have to unionize. And I heard whispers of unions in Korean media industries, but they're not impactful. They are not effective, and they really need to take it seriously. They need to invest some time and money into planning and strategizing so they can protect their industry workers, because dying of overworking is ridiculous. Nobody should die on a film or TV set. It's not worth it. And that's the big irony of this, because Kingdom critiques those in power, right? It's a critique of power corruption and those with the wealth, but their set doesn't seem to take care of the people behind the camera, and I think that's a real shame. I loved Peduna on this show. I think Peduna is loved by pretty much everybody, and she symbolizes feminine power but also queer femininity, and she's got this great presence and energy in like almost anything I've ever seen her in. And Kim Eun-hee wrote a special episode based on Kingdom called Ashin of the North, which, if you've seen the last episode of season 2 of Kingdom, you know who Ashin is, okay? I remember seeing on social media some white boys like fangirling over Kingdom and saying how much they love it more than The Walking Dead, a show I've never seen. They were all saying they would love to see a season 3 of Kingdom, and I was like, there is most definitely going to be more of Kingdom, okay? They wouldn't end with a shot of Chun Ji-hyun in the end of season 2 if they're not going to do more of Kingdom, okay? Like, they're gonna bring her back. Chun Ji-hyun is a huge global Hallyu star. She was made world famous in Asia through the film My Sassy Girl, which is, of course, an amazing movie, and she became a huge TV success through the show My Love from Another Star, which she starred opposite Kim Soo-hyun. And if you haven't seen the 2001 film 엽기적인 그녀 or My Sassy Girl, please watch it. It's a classic. It's a classic rom-com, and to this day, one of my favorite films of all time. Like, it still cracks me up because Chun Ji-hyun and Cha Tae-hyun's chemistry is like a match made in heaven. There's like no other. It's just nobody compares. And not too many people know this, but Chun Ji-hyun and Cha Tae-hyun played love interests in a 1999 TV show called Happy Together. The TV show sucked, but it had some huge stars in it. Like Lee Byung-hun was in it, Song Seung-hun was in it, but it's not a very good show at all. Today's guest is Dan Telfer. He's a comedian and writer. His credits include Mad Magazine, The Onion. He wrote on the series The High Court with Doug Benson and D&D Beyond. He also worked on Midnight with Chris Hardwick, and he's just an overall hilarious guy, and he's a really good person, and he's a fan of Kingdom. So what's not to like? Let's talk to Dan Telfer. I was like talking to Natisha. I emailed Dan like a while ago. I DM'd Dan a while ago about this thing. I'm like waiting to hear back. She's like, yeah, he's like newly in love and like he's like moving and he's got all these changes in his life. I was like, oh, right. Yeah. Gotta let him do his thing. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, well, I'm glad. I didn't know I could be using newly in love as an excuse.
Of course.
I should really lean on that more.
All the time. Yeah. Like, even if it's been like 15 years, be like, I'm newly in love and, just didn't get around to responding. But yeah, how's that going? Your new relationship?
It's great. We had been friends for like 5 years, and she's a
Oh.
musician,
Mm-hmm.
and she had done some like comedy and music shows, and yeah, we just got closer over the pandemic, and we're like, okay, well, let's hang out all the time.
Wow. Very nice.
Yeah,
That's always interesting, like when people are friends and then they start dating, because it doesn't always work out well, right? Like it's when it does work out, it's so great and it's like miraculous and it's awesome because you know each other, you have an understanding of who each other are and all that, and it's really nice. But like when it's not, when it was like a mistake, it's like, oh, this was a
yeah,
mistake. Like, has that ever happened to you?
yes. Well, yes, but I'm not a big dating person, so
Okay, yeah.
I'm happy that it worked out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not either. Like when it comes to dating, I'm just like, no, thank you. Like especially last couple of years, I've just been like, no, thanks. Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of work. It takes up a lot of like mental and emotional energy and all that. What, do you have a dog or something? You have a pet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you hear a noise, that's my girlfriend's French bulldog who is
Oh, so
whining for attention.
cute. Oh, what a cute dog. Man,
Yeah.
it's taking it's like so much. Like I'm just really trying hard not to get a pet right now, because I know that that's what I
Man.
want, but
Yeah.
nope.
Well, I'm a cat person, right? It's
Mm,
where I hosted all those shows in a freaking
yes.
cat shelter
Yes.
slash bookstore slash venue. So like
Yes.
I've been like this close to getting a cat, but I don't. I'm at my girlfriend's parents' place. I
Mm,
can't get a cat.
yeah. Oh, okay. So you haven't been raising cats like on your own?
No, 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 no cat farm that you might expect me to
Mm.
be a part of, but I've definitely gone on some walks in the neighborhood where I've tried to pet all the cats because
Oh.
Sacramento, the weather is nice enough that people just let their cats outside all the time,
Oh,
which
wow.
I don't think I could ever do. I don't. I
Yeah.
love cats. I love letting animals be what they are
Yes.
and be free,
Mhm.
but the idea of letting my own personal pet wander around and then come back, that's no thanks. Like I think that's how really sad things happen. So
Yeah.
I don't get it per se, but I enjoy that I can walk down the street and pet everyone's cat. That's nice.
Yeah, it does take a lot of trust in not only the cat, but in the universe that your cat will be safe when you just let it out. Because, like, they can't come back and just, like, tell you what happened to it. They, they don't
Yeah,
speak.
part of what I love about cats is they're very independently spirited and they don't need you emotionally. So
Right.
like I get it, but I don't trust that they won't sort of independently wander into a truck or a coyote, and I don't want to.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
know that when I grew up, I had this cat that was a real piece of shit. His name was Chucky,
Uh-huh.
and he was long haired, and my mom got him from a friend, and we just my brother and I spent all this time brushing his long ass hair and taking care of him, even though he would fight us.
Uh-huh.
And he would pick fights with like pit bulls and German
Oh,
shepherds in the neighborhood. He was an outdoor cat,
wow.
and I hated it. I was like, "Can we just keep him inside?" My mom was like, "No, it's not his spirit." And we were
Uh,
like, "Ugh." And then, but then there was at least twice where he was gone for like a week, and we found him like under a collapsed fence,
oh,
and
God.
he was like, not maimed, but like really badly screwed up and like
Yeah.
hiding,
Okay,
and he was
yeah.
an asshole.
Yeah, yeah, and you have that
So
experience. Yeah, and you also understand that like when they're outdoors a lot, they become more feral, and hence the assholeness.
right, right, and I know that now, having done a thing called Google, but like in the late 80s, early 90s, like
Yeah,
everyone was just like, oh, if a cat wants to go outside, you just let it,
let
and I
them
was like, that
out.
seems overly generous.
Yeah, like I had a neighbor who did that too. Like she had this one cat. It was like a really cute tabby, and they would just let her out all the time. And one day she just comes home pregnant, and then they
Right.
become four cats. Yeah, And the family was just okay with letting the cat out and letting the cat back in, and they would just let the cat sleep in their bed. And I'm like, the cat's been all over the world, and the cat tracked in the world into your bed, and you're cool with that. It's admirable, honestly. I don't have that kind of leniency. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're in the sack. That's what they call it up there, right? The sack.
Yes, and the show started, right? I walked right into it. We're already in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're
Okay.
doing it. We're in it. And this blue hair thing, this is a pandemic change, right?
Sort of. I used to dye my hair all the time.
Oh, okay.
I used to have mohawks and that were like blue and green.
Ah,
And, even as recently as like 2 years ago, I had like purple and blue and
nice.
blonde hair. But you know, I definitely feel like if I'm in the pandemic, who gives a shit? You know, I used to have a manager. I used to go out to audition for like game show host gigs and other
Right.
comedian adjacent acting, but
Yeah.
like, why not? I'm lucky that my girlfriend also dyes her hair and she
Uh-huh.
knows how to do it.
Yeah.
So she's gets all the credit for it looking half decent. I just did it again yesterday, so it's extremely neon right now.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. Yeah, quite a people. I mean, that's been the pandemic thing, right? Like doing things to your hair,
Sure.
because all the salons.
Is it? I don't know. I haven't talked to anyone else who's done anything crazy
Well,
besides.
early
my-
on,
my-
like in March, no, like April, May, that was like something I saw a lot on social media, like people cutting their own hair, people dyeing their
Right.
own hair. I don't have the bravery to do it.
if yeah,
I
if
had-
it helps, I feel like I've seen more people complain that they can't possibly cut their own hair.
yeah,
A lot of people talk about it. I think 100% of everyone is talking about the new environment, but like,
uh-huh.
you know, maybe it's because of the privilege I have. I noticed the other end of the spectrum. Everybody's going like, "Oh God, they have to open a salon right now. My hair is impossible. I can't
Yes.
touch it."
Yes, I am one of those people.
Man, I'm lucky as a guy. I don't have to deal with the sort of emotional part. Growing up, my dad went bald when he was 16, and he like wouldn't
Oh,
let me
wow.
in my. And I had 4 stepbrothers, 2 on each remarriage side. I had all these brothers,
Yeah.
and we were all within only like a year and a half, 2 years of each other.
Yeah.
And my dad got remarried, and I had 2 stepbrothers, so I had 3 brothers on that side.
Uh-huh.
And my dad was always like, "You guys, you can never shave your head." I was bald too young. It's too traumatic to see my own flesh and blood with his shaved head. You can never. And he would just talk about how he went bald when he was 16 all the time. And at one point, I saw he left his toupee in the bathtub, and I thought it was a muskrat that had broken into the house. And I freaked out. It's like, oh, and I screamed, and my mom wasn't able to laugh about it till they got divorced years later, but it was very funny. But I grew up with this idea that hair is very like terrifyingly precious, and I think I had a sense of irony and humor about it
Yeah.
by the time I was like 10 or 11 years old, because it was like, who cares? Like,
Right.
there's no way if I go bald I will be as upset as my father was. So if this all fell out, it would be like whatever.
Right.
It's,
Right. Well, you
I mean,
say.
it did briefly, but
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's right. You're a cancer survivor. That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I noticed that you talk about that a lot, and you also released an album recently, did you not?
Yeah, so I had enough material where I was going to go on the road and kind of like get an hour looking real tight and put another album out. And then, Grace, I don't know if you knew this, Civilization melted. So what I did was I just took a couple of the shows that I had in the bank.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend is not just a musician, but she's an audio engineer. And so she went into some of the video I had and like really like, you know, made the audio as pretty and high
Yeah.
quality as you could. And I put it out as 2 EPs that equal an hour, but are from 2 different shows. And I don't know about you, like, I'm a big fan of comedy albums. I grew up with them. It's a big
Yeah.
reason why I'm in stand-up. And I never really was a huge, like, I never judged a comedian for doing it, but I was never a huge fan of, like, putting out an album where it's from multiple shows and the audience sounds different and the acoustics sound different. So I just was like, I'll put out 2 EPs. One of them's like 15 minutes, and then one of them's like half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just put those out separate as opposed to trying to cram them together.
Hmm.
And I'll just call them EPs to signify like I'm acknowledging this is a short album
Mm-hmm.
and not like a full hour.
Mm-hmm.
Because I figured it was topical enough where if people listen to it, it'll sell enough. And let people be like, "Oh, this is like a new album, sort of."
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't topical enough that I thought if I sat on that material for however fucking long
Right.
we're living, like that it would be worth putting out in front of a live audience
Yeah.
in 2022 or whatever. I had a feeling, when I put the first one out, it was because Bandcamp.
Yeah.
So Bandcamp is awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like they give the person putting the albums out all this wonderful percentage that Apple and Spotify don't. So like,
Yeah.
they had those free artist days where they're giving the artists 100%.
Oh, very nice.
They still do it actually, but they started doing it. I want to say like May, and I was like, oh, they're gonna do this. I'll put it on Bandcamp, yeah, it worked. It worked out really well, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
But I've got those out, and that's nice.
Yeah. What's the title of the albums?
The first one was called Patience Zero,
Mm-hmm.
and then the second one is called I gotta look it up. Something about chaos. The Greater Chaotic Good is what it's called.
Oh, nice. I love those titles.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They're nerdy.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, yeah, but you're a nerd, right? I mean, like geeky
I guess I
teas,
didn't.
like come on.
But but it wasn't like okay to be a nerd
That's true.
until like 2007, and then I think.
Yeah.
And I'm 42, so like it wasn't. Not only was it not okay to be a nerd,
majority
till
of
I
your
was
life.
like, right, for like my whole life. If you said you were a nerd, it's like, okay, well, fuck you, we're gonna kill you.
right,
But
right.
but then it only took like a year and a half before
Mm-hmm.
nerds having become the center of the universe ruined everything and became
Yeah.
these like assaulting,
Mm-hmm.
horrible people who were just as bad as any jock. And like,
Silicon
so I was
Valley monsters. Yeah.
right. Silicon Valley monsters, really toxic members of every community who were
Yep.
really misogynist, and I was like, Ugh. Okay, I guess I owned it for like a year and a half because it was good for my stand-up career, and then I was like, you know what, let's go back to me just being awkward. What if that was the let's just use that as the tag.
Yeah, it's
and
a safer brand. Yeah.
But there was definitely like I remember a point where like I thought being nerdy had been taken back, like we took it back.
Yeah.
And I was doing a show in rural Michigan, and I said, yeah, so I'm kind of nerdy, and like a whole table of people were like, yeah, no shit. Ugh. And I was like, oh, people still think of nerds as like
Yeah.
this 1950s level, like we have to kill them so they don't breed, like cockroach level thing. I was like, God,
What do you think that's about? Like what makes nerds hateful that way? Like why do people attack them and want to murder them? Why?
Well, that is a very old thing, right? And again, let's not give nerds too much credit. They've ruined everything they've taken back. But like that particular hatred, I really do think is just these people who think only the strong should survive. It's this like manifest destiny level, like oh, you're weak and gross. We have to make sure the women, aren't accidentally falling in love with you. Like kind of like bully mentality where like you really think life is only about like breeding and money and nothing else. Like it's really strange, but
It is strange. It is strange.
America's a very broken country founded on stealing land, and I think a lot of people are in like this decades of denial. It's really disturbing.
Yeah, so maybe some of it is kind of that primal instinct that
I think so.
one should ignore, but they kind of let it take over their minds.
I think so. I think it's also just a bully mentality. One of the reasons I do feel like comfortable leaning on that nerd thing is because I was bullied really horribly as a child, and so I feel like unlike a lot of nerds who are just like I like video games, but also I've never had a problem with dating. I'm very attractive. I feel like I'm the kind of person who like at least until I was an adult, didn't know what the fuck to do with myself. So like I get like what it's like to be a bully. Bullies are typically people who they get more social status by shoving people down,
Mm-hmm.
and they rarely pay any consequences. It's usually somebody who as a kid was like born into a top status either because of money
Mm-hmm.
or size
Mm-hmm.
or just denial.
Right.
And they know they'll get more friends, money, food, shelter. They're
Yeah.
cavemen basically. So it's they don't, and they, yeah, the, bullies never really pay a price. Bullies generally got away with it their whole lives. Nobody really
Yeah.
if you remember bullying when we were both kids, even though we're very different generations, they've
Mm-hmm.
never really had a clear, clean law about it in America or pretty much anywhere. It's bullying is like this thing people still get away with. So
Mm-hmm.
like it's
Yeah,
yeah.
bullying it's somewhat normalized. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who are on the other end of it are also sort of trained to accept it, to trained to kind of be like, oh, that's okay. Like even at work, if your boss is a dick, it's like, oh yeah, they're supposed to be that way. They're supposed to be rude, monstrous assholes and push us around to help make us quote unquote
Yeah.
better. Yeah. So
I-
yeah, maybe it's very closely. It fits in neatly with capitalist sort of mentality, like efficiency. Um, yeah, get
Mhm.
things done. Uh huh. Like stop whining, shut up, get it done. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. This American
Ugh.
Christian capitalist sort of ideology. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, then you get into that creepy Ayn Rand, Rand Paul, like conservative shit with bootstraps. It's who was it?
Yeah.
I want who is this might be Malcolm X. Who somebody has that quote of like it might be Martin Luther King,
Hmm.
like they talk about pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, but they've been stealing our boots.
Mm.
Like we've been without shoes for
Yeah.
our whole lives, like
Mhm. Mhm.
the level of entitlement in this country is really disturbing. I don't
Yeah.
like it very much.
Yeah. Yeah. It is disturbing, and I think, yeah, I think it takes time for people to come around to it. Because, like, for so long, especially when I was, like, in my late teens, early 20s, when I was starting to work and, like, make my own money and whatnot, like, life just felt very hard. And I was just like, oh, is this how it's going to be, like, till the day I die? Because it's just exhausting. It's a lot. I'm very unhappy. And I was just like, this is awful. And then, you just come around to it and you're like, oh, like you don't have to live that way. I don't have to live that way. I could choose an easier path if I want. Let me try and figure out what the easiest path is. And so that's what I've been doing. And that is why I pursue comedy, because this is such an easy path. It's like a walk in the park, right?
Oh yeah, they tell you right away you will make no money at this. You should lower your standards. You should prepare for trauma, and you're like, oh, that's all where I was going already. Yeah, yeah.
I'm used to it. Yeah, I'm prepared for this by life. Yeah, so let's talk about Kingdom a little bit, because usually I don't talk about the show so much with my guests, because most of my guests have never seen Korean television at all. But I know you watched Kingdom.
I
Um,
did. I've watched all of it.
yeah, how did you even get around to it? Are you just a zombie fan? Is that what the attraction was like?
I got really lucky. I got to this point in stand up where I could just go on Twitter and say, "Hey, what should I watch?" And I got it that way. Just like people
Nice.
were telling me on Twitter, "This thing's amazing. If you
Mm-hmm.
like, it's one of those things where they're like, "Oh, if you like Parasite, you'll love
I see.
Kingdom." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And now that I've seen it, I'm like, "Oh, this is like Game of Thrones level fun."
Yeah.
And it's I felt like I should have found out about it sooner. South Korea's film and TV industry is so fucking amazing. It's really starting to become clear that I
Yeah.
need to watch more of it. The next movie I have to watch is it pronounced Busan? The Train to Busan. Have you
Train
seen
to
that?
Busan? Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. That looks like an amazing zombie movie,
Yeah.
and yeah, I just got told to watch it, and then I got sucked in immediately. It's really funny, goofy, campy, but like its production value is so high
It is.
that it's undeniably addictive. Like you get, I think, one episode in, and you're like, holy shit, this set cost more than most American
Yeah.
TV, and I haven't heard about this. It's kind of stunning that it flies under the radar. I really feel like it's just casual
Mm-hmm.
American racism that keeps it from being the most like
Mm-hmm.
talked about thing on Netflix. Where are they with the new season?
I think this year they're gonna come out with the. It's not even a prequel or a sequel. It's like a side episode or a side movie. I think it's gonna be like a one-off, but
Is that just because of the restrictions? They were like, this is what we can handle?
probably, most likely.
Because
But
they really set up the. We're getting ahead of ourselves, right? But like,
No,
they
no,
really
it's
set
okay.
up like a new season was like very. There was the most of any season they were hinting more was on the way.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, very much, very much. They were like, there's still this profound secret behind the resurrection plant.
We were talking about this on Twitter, I think, right? Like how like the end of the season, I didn't know who the hell that lady was. But my girlfriend and I were like, why the fuck did she turn around all dramatically to the camera like that? And we were like, she's a very commonly known actress, right?
Yeah, it like that. You're talking about the American ignorance right now. That is very much an American ignorance. Like all of Asia, parts of Latin America, parts of Africa, they know who she is. Like Chun Ji-hyun is a huge star. She's been a huge star for like 20 years, ever since that film My Sassy Girl. And, she started out as a model, very successful model. She was in TV dramas since like late 90s. And, My Sassy Girl came out in, I think, the year 2000. Huge success. She became like this mega star instantly, overnight. And yeah, anything she ever does or touches is just like a hit, So when I saw her turn around, I was like, oh, there is definitely going to be more of this show, because like they wouldn't just put her in there just be like, oh, why don't we just stick her in as a cameo? It's like you don't put a star of that stature in as a cameo. You put a star like that in there to signal to everybody that there will be more of this show. Yeah, she's a huge star, Chun Ji-hyun. So that's exciting. And I was just like, I was just thinking a lot about like blood, when it came to the show. I was thinking a lot about like, what does the zombie signify in like a Joseon dynasty Korea, like pre-modern, monarch Korea? What does this signify? You mentioned Train to Busan. The filmmaker made a feature animated film, which I don't know if the distribution is as accessible here. So if you really want to nerd out and watch them like in sequence, I would recommend watching the animated feature first by the director and then watching Train to Busan.
Okay.
Yeah. And Busan is where I was born, actually.
No kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to give away spoilers, talk about it, but we're not talking about Train to Busan in this. We're talking about Kingdom.
Yeah, I really dug Kingdom. I think the biggest surprise for me from the show was just the production value, but I like the plot. We joked about this on Twitter a little bit too, but it is funny how like it really comes apart at the seams a little bit with the fake science. Like you were talking about the blood. I was like, man, like I was able to, I think, suspend my disbelief pretty well, but there is definitely a point in this. It's only 2 seasons, right? So like, and I haven't watched it in 8 months now, and I binged it in like a week, so my brain's a little fuzzy. But like it's funny how like last couple of episodes they really are treating the zombie virus like a very strict vampire rules, or like the movie Gremlins with Mogwai, like don't feed him after midnight kind of shit, like with this virus. And I was like, okay, but it's much more about intrigue for like a season and a half.
Yeah.
It felt, because I felt like it dealt with this sort of folklore aspect of it really well for a while. So like I I don't mean to brag because I am very
Mhm.
dumb. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, I'm not like an academic person, but
Mhm.
I'm a nerd, as we've
Yeah.
established. I love
Yeah.
folklore, and I used to be a playwright, and I used to write
Mm.
about folktale type stuff, and
Mhm.
I was in a theater company that was all about folktales, and
Yeah.
I was really into how in the beginning it felt did you see Lovecraft Country?
I watched
Like
like the first episode.
it really well, I liked it, but it's a difficult watch, so I will never blame anyone for bailing on that
Yeah.
show. But uh, it tries to weave in on Lovecraft Country, Korean folktale in a very unique way, and I thought this show really, because it was taking place so far back in the past, was treating the zombie thing like they weren't really zombies. They were just
Mhm.
they were like a kind of ghost or something.
Ghosts. Mhm.
Um, Remind me a lot of Japanese ghost stories and even
Mhm.
African ghost stories. The way these were people who had died, but like
Mhm.
it felt like they were motivated by a god or something rather than their
Mhm.
blood.
Yeah.
So that part I loved. I really loved in the beginning. I felt almost like a religious kind of zombie.
Yeah.
And then when it got to be about the blood, it was only disappointing because they talked about it a lot.
Too
And
much. Yeah.
how much you want to get into spoilers on your
Oh,
show,
all of
Grace?
it. Yeah. I
It
told everybody from episode 1 that this will be full of spoilers, so we're good.
the dipping people into water shit got real fucking silly because like it made you go back, right? Like they don't
Yeah.
really mention it till near the end of the second
Yeah.
season, but like we're talking a season and a half of like you got to go, oh, like wait, when did that one person fall in the water 8 episodes
Yeah.
ago? So like you start going like, I feel like there's like upwards of 700 people who were cured.
Yeah, like they were, because
Just
there was a lot of
cured.
water. Yeah. Yeah. When they were
The
battling.
first season they like they get like
Yeah.
tricked into going in the water. There's a
Yeah.
boat full of people that get
Yes.
infected. Like it was a plot element that they must have known was coming up, but they just like glossed over.
Yeah. Yeah, that
So
that I didn't even think that far into it. I was just like, "Oh, wait, it's a worm?" Like that annoyed me. I was like, that's very annoying that it's very materialist kind of, it's now getting into like sci-fi kind of shit. Yeah, and I agree. When you mentioned zombies, yeah, like I think the zombie, it comes from like Haiti, right? Is that correct? I think they come from Haiti. I think it's like a Haitian kind of.
well, yeah, it's tough because you're right. I think and it's definitely got roots in that what is it? It's like a poison that you give people, and then they wake
Hmm.
up and they wander around.
Hmm.
They talk about it in the Serpent and the Rainbow. Do you know
Mm-hmm.
the Serpent and the Rainbow? So like,
No.
yeah, like, you're right. But I think that's our modern idea in a zombie. The idea of there just being like sort of undead husks of people is like a very very old idea that predates, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that modern idea of zombies that I think is only like 150 years old.
Yeah. And do you remember seeing in the news like there were like all these minks that became zombies? Did you
Mm-hmm.
see? That
Well,
freaked me
okay,
out.
and then the I think the most commonly known creepy nature zombie, right, is that fungus that can like grow in an ant's brain.
Oh my
Have you seen
God.
that? So
No.
there's this thing that it's a spore. This is the inspiration for the video games The Last of Us 1 and 2, but like there's this spore that will like infect an ant, and the ant's head will get taken over and it will run their central nervous system, but the spore will just start blooming out of the ant's exoskeletal head, like split
Oh my
the
God.
exoskeleton open, and it'll just tell the ant to go high up, and the head will just sort of reach out and the spores will just like
Oh my
spread
God. And will the
and
ant like move around and like attack other ants and bite them and
yeah.
shit?
Well, it won't. I don't think it bites them, but it definitely like will try to infect other ants. But I mean, that's what's really, I think, compelling about the virus take on zombies is there are a lot of viruses. Grace, there's a lot of viruses where the way it spreads is it does influence the behavior of its host to try to have it engage in more risky behavior. This is
Right.
this is something that you could read about in the 90s with toxoplasmosis. As a friend of the cat, the house cat, I can tell you, did you ever see the movie Trainspotting?
I did.
So remember when the guy dies of quote-unquote cat shite disease?
Uh-huh. Yes.
It's because he has AIDS and he gets from the cats this toxoplasmosis thing that is very deadly when your immune system is compromised.
Yeah.
Which I was worried. I'm glad I didn't have a cat when I was going through chemotherapy. But like the idea, I don't know if that really mattered.
Yeah.
I'm just a paranoid person.
Yeah.
Don't look that up and listeners, don't look that up and tell me whether
Don't
I should
throw
have
away
been
your
afraid.
cat if you have cancer.
No. But that is, if you have HIV, they at least used to be, when Trainspotting was made, and AIDS was a little more mysterious to science, because I think it was in the book for Trainspotting too, and that was written 10 years earlier, I think. The idea that you could get this was scary, and that disease, they were worried for a while. I don't know how true it is or if they ever prove or disprove, but I remember for years reading about how scary it was. Toxoplasmosis is mostly this thing in cats and other animals that will like lead them to die on purpose. It will it like makes you kind of like get adrenaline rushes that make you like say wander into traffic and stuff like that. So they were realizing more and more people were passively infected with it, and that they weren't dying because their immune systems were fine. But the virus was thriving in their system with no clear effects. But then they did brain scans on people, and it was affecting their thoughts.
Oh,
so
it's
like
it's
I
like
don't
meth.
know. Right, and I don't have enough current data on this, but I think about this kind of thing a lot. Like there was concern that this virus could cause a human being to engage in suicidal behavior, and that everyone had it, like a bunch of people who either were around cats for a minute or had been around other people who had cats, and it was scary. There was articles written about it 20 years ago, so I'm like, I'm having some old paranoia, but like when I read about the news and what's happening now, I get really freaked out, because I think a lot of people are like over the virus. They're like, I'm just gonna live my life, and I'm like, it sounds like that was written by the virus. It sounds like
That's hilarious.
Sounds like the press release for your life sounds like it was written by the virus. Because guess who's gonna have more fun than you when you have that barbecue? The virus. The virus is gonna have a great time at your barbecue. Oh, but I'm outside. Yeah, you still need a mask, it turns out. You still This is not a virus that goes, wait, I'm outside. I guess I gotta be nice.
I remember like the morning I was in New York at the time. I remember I woke up that morning and I looked at my phone and they were like, Trump has COVID. And so I was like, okay. And like at the time I was very happy because I was like back home and, I was like seeing my friends and I was like eating steak and I was just happy at the time. And so I was in a very positive place. And like when I saw my the friends that I was staying with, I turned to him, I was like, oh, happy day. And he looked at me, he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, Trump has COVID. And he's like, oh, wow. Okay. He's like, why do you say, oh, happy day? I was like, I guess because I believe that, now that he has it, he'll come around to some realizations, with death at his doorstep. And he was like, oh, okay. And of course that just did not happen at all.
I think that's really, I don't mean to sound condescending, Grace. I think a lot of you and your intelligence. I think that's shockingly optimistic.
Yeah, I was very optimistic.
The song "I Believe in Miracles" was playing in my head, but it's because I thought he was gonna die. I thought he was gonna die, Grace. That's why I was excited. I didn't think he was gonna realize
that was, of course, on the other. That was, of course, the primary. But I was also thinking, like, I mean, he's the president. They're gonna give him the best medical care and all that. So, assuming that, and also knowing how many people had recovered from it, I was just like,
I knew he wouldn't, but I was also just like, ooh, he's gonna suffer.
The hope was he's gonna suffer, and suffering will lead to compassion and understanding, and that he would come around. And none of that happened. None of it. In fact, it went the opposite. It got worse.
I did, as was observed by many folks, I really did enjoy his sort of fwady cat walk he had
Mm-hmm.
to the helicopter that one day. He did
The
have this look on his face of
yes.
uh-oh,
Uh-oh.
Papa's got an owie, you know. But
The
yeah.
lethargy that he was
Yeah,
exhibiting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
cuz
That was mhm.
he's only
Yeah.
had the most basic suffering his whole life. The only suffering he's ever had is the egg McMuffin shits because he doesn't take care of his body. But like he's finally, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, but yeah, like the whole virus thing. Yeah, I don't know. When I was watching Kingdom though, I was just kind of thinking more in terms of blood um like if you watch it, they talk about blood often. Like
yes,
the Cho clan that's like obsessed with blood lineage. He's like, I want my blood to be royal blood. And when the daughter, with her daddy issues, the queen, she's like, I'm not pregnant. The old fart, he couldn't knock her up, or she kept miscarrying because the doctors faulted the woman. They were like, you have a inhospitable womb or whatever. And so they faulted her, of course, as they do. And so she devises this horrible plan to just round up pregnant women in their third trimester and feed them and house them until they're ready to give birth, and once they do, she will pick the boy out of the crop, and if they're girls, then they will be killed. So this kind of harkens back to like Korea's history of gender. How do you say? Like it's a gendered abortion. They did this up until the
oh wow,
80s, where they preferred boys over girls um, due to patriarchal purposes, the whole patrilineal obsession. And so that's there. And then this whole like notion of blood also in Korea, like, um, it's like, oh, like you have to have like, it's like a nationalist thing. So it's actually like a conservative nationalist ideology. It's similar to like, what you get in among the Germans with the Nazis. It's similar to what you get among the white supremacists.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
there's still a lot of it in current day Europe, just across all the countries.
Oh yeah. I mean, no, it's there. It's in every country. You find nationalism in every single country,
Yep.
and you find conservative ideology linked to essentialism, and blood ties and all of that. You find it in every single country. But countries that have suffered in war tend to be more, vindictive, and they will take it out in weird ways, like many supremacists do. It's out of insecurity, right? So like that's what the Cho
Yeah.
clan does, and but just kind of thinking in terms of like, I mean, or maybe even your understanding of like zombies, like, um, do you? Because like this is my understanding of it, just from what little I read about it.
Mm-hmm.
Zombies are supposed to represent like capitalist neoliberal kind of crisis of some sort, like um it can be about like the rich, like the poor eating the poor, because the
Yeah.
wealthy are holding everything at the top and the poor can't get out of their poor system. So we have that kind of like class warfare a little bit, where the upper class in kingdom are taking advantage of the lower class and turning them into slaves or turning them into zombie warriors, or letting them die letting them die off and starve off. Um, but then like kind of tying back to like blood again, when the baby at the end is born, right? I mean, they have the baby and they say that this is the next crown prince and gonna be the heir to the
Mm.
throne. um and they're like, well, this isn't of royal blood, right? And it's like the prince Chang at the time is like, okay, well, this baby has to be the king. um I will leave the picture because I beheaded
Yeah.
my father, and a bunch of people witnessed that, and we don't want problems later on. So he exits, even though he is of quote unquote royal blood, right? But I liked what he said, where he says, like, this baby is my brother, and this baby is my father's son. And that was a very ambiguous thing to say, because what that means, he could have been saying that like figuratively, metaphorically, and just be like, just put that in the written text and the historical annals or whatever. But I think he was saying it like, as a nation, we are one and we are
Yep.
of the same blood.
I
And
agree.
therefore, this is of royal blood. And I was just like, oh, what an ambiguous thing to say. Because this whole time I thought, oh, like if you let this low class bastard child become the king, then it's like you kind of upturn this obsession with royal blood and whatnot. But then if you then go ahead and say this is now like this is of royal blood because, you know, the king's blood is like everybody's blood, or, you know, like we're all kind of kings in that way, then it's like you could easily read that as, oh, this is like a nationalist supremacist kind of thing.
Well, that's where it gets tricky, right? I mean, I saw this just a couple months after seeing Parasite, so the whole time I was definitely like, oh man, South Korea's doing classism right. You know, I was like excited to see them comment on it. I think that kind of commentary is important for all of us to get out of this really horrible classist world that we've been in since the beginning of humanity, and it's difficult to yank ourselves out of it. I really remember that point feeling like it was a complicated writing move on behalf of the show, because it did feel like they were at the same time trying to have their cake and eat it too. Like
Yeah.
okay, he's being noble, but also it's shitty. You know, it's tough. It's tough because okay, I really quick. I don't want to talk too much about myself because there's so much to talk about the show, but I identify with pacifism in horror. I love when the hero is violent because he has to be, and it's kind of the whole time like, I wish I didn't have to do this. It's so much better than adrenaline fueled violence. I get really turned off by adrenaline fueled violence, like Natural Born Killers and even Zombieland 1 and 2, which I think are fun movies, but I get bored. I'm like, all right, I get it. You're excited you get to kill people, fucking whatever. But like, I think what I find more compelling is when you're like, you're doing it and you hate doing it, and there's like this sort of like this more realistic kind of solemnness about it. You're like, ugh. It's why The Walking Dead, I think, was good for half a season there. Like, I think it was like this idea of like, oh, wait, it's sorrowful to be stuck in this situation. And I think when he has that moment of he's saying like, oh, he is my brother, he is my father's son, and he is implying that there is this sort of moment where like, oh, he's finding the humanity, he's finding a reason to empathize with this baby, he's finding a reason to be a pacifist, he's finding like oh, like I could be selfish right now. And it's really fucked up how he still puts all this emphasis on his dad after 2 seasons of just like but your dad hasn't been human for a while. It seems like he was kind of a trash heap before he turned into a zombie. Like it really, it's frustrating. But I think it's one of the better parts of the show. I think when the show leaned on that kind of stuff, you could really get where the characters were coming from. You can really go, okay, this was the 1300s, so humanity had a different sense of what was right and wrong, and of course you would say something like that. But I really liked that moment. It just sucked because I don't know, like his stepmom was such a piece of shit, and she set it all up, and it really felt like he was also letting her win. So I always like was hoping it would kind of go a third way. I don't know how historically accurate the show is either. So I know, you know, they talk about the Japanese conflict, right?
Yeah.
So I know it's based in reality, but I at the same time was like, this didn't happen. So like I wanted it to be like he goes, well, let's just disassemble the patriarchy completely. Like, right? Like I wanted him to be like, okay, time for 1300s level 21st century socialism. Let's Like I wanted him to suddenly become the AOC of 1300 Japan, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen great. But like I really felt like he had a moment there that was a little good, a little frustrating. It was definitely like a trope they played with his character, where he was noble to a fault. So I think I was really, you know, and that last episode, they really hurried it along. It's kind of insane how much they need that third season. I really, because it was like all like the way he dies and comes back, and then they have that scene, and then the epilogue is like half the episode. It felt like the epilogue was like he goes and now they're virus hunters. You know,
it was like really fast.
And and they find that lady
Hmm.
who I guess had orchestrated the virus.
She was some kind of drug mule. They made her seem like some,
Okay,
yeah, like she's a mercenary of some sort.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Um,
I wanted to know where this was going. I wanted to know who was the baby in charge. There's clearly they were setting it up like there was going to be, you'll have King Baby over here, you'll have Drug Mule over here,
yeah,
but I really was hoping it would get a little more to the human aspect of it and a little less about the rules. The
yeah.
rules got
But
a little much.
the rules got a bit, yeah, it was getting wacky. But I did find it ingenious that they were like, oh, we don't have enough foot soldiers, so let's turn these infected, dying people into zombies. We'll kill them, turn them into zombies, and then
Yeah.
turn them into soldiers. I thought that was brilliant. And then I thought it was, as from an evil standpoint, of course, and just like a narrative plot device, I was just like, oh, that's actually brilliant. And then when the queen turns zombies, like, loose on the kingdom, like, just be like, all right, like, fuck you, fuck all of you, I'm gonna,
Uh-huh.
kill all of you. I thought that was also really brilliant because, like, these the undead are like, you can't kill, it's impossible to kill them unless everybody has a gun and a sword, which not everybody does. And the fast pace that it kind of
Hmm.
spreads, I was just kind of like, oh, as a weapon, this is actually really ingenious. Yeah, to kind of use these people.
And I was hoping they'd end up more like ghosts. I love that shit where they were all bunch up under tree roots and fucking
Hmm.
house foundations whenever the sun came out. That was fucking great.
Yeah, that was
But then
amazing. Yeah,
But
yeah.
then it becomes like, well, if the fog conditions are above 50% visibility, then they can just walk around and do whatever the fuck. I was like, all right.
I know, I
You
know.
kind
As
of
soon as
disassembled it.
normally when people are that specific, they're like, "Oh, that's good writing," right? But then when it comes to stuff like this, if it's too specific, it's like, okay, now it's just getting too silly, and that's why
Well, they
they
built it up too
criticize.
much.
Yeah, 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 yeah. They built it up, and they built it up towards the latter end of it, and that's what made it tricky suddenly.
Yeah,
Um,
where like now you have
mhm.
again you go back over it's such a carefully paced show. You go over the hours you've already watched and go, okay, when could they have followed a fog?
Yeah,
When was there a rolling fog bank? They would have just always followed it, right?
yeah. No, it gets silly like that. But a great show nonetheless. I was just like I was, because I was rewatching it for this podcast, and I was just like, what a great show. I'm like, this is like a thump. This is a great show.
Yeah, it is.
And the writer, she's also very, very like sought after by the Korean TV industry. She's actually married to an independent filmmaker. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I did
so
see that, and
yeah,
I thought it was cool.
yeah. Like he taught her how to screenwrite, and then now she's like outdone him like
I was gonna
by
say like because my girlfriend Kaylin and I were like looking her up, and we were like,
yeah,
oh, like she really knocked this out of the park and like kind of outshone
yeah.
him.
All
It
the
was
way.
funny.
Yeah, yeah. There was like a variety show where the two of them were being interviewed, and then he was just like, yeah, I'm the one that taught her how to like write a screenplay. Like, I'm the one that. But man, does she like bring home the bread? Like, she's really the one who gets paid a
Yeah.
lot more because he's an independent filmmaker. Indie filmmakers are like basically beggars. They don't make any money out of their
Of course,
films. Come
that's
on.
true in any country, but that she produced Hollywood level stuff, and truly the
Yeah.
gore. I'm impressed with the CGI level that she did it with because it
Hmm.
looks good. There's a lot of really bad CGI blood effects. There's a lot of
There is. Yeah.
a lot of TV and movies in America where they put a ton of money into it, but then when somebody bleeds on the ground, it looks like a college film where they've got ketchup packets for blood. It's like, oh, you should have just used ketchup packets. That CGI blood looks terrible.
Yeah, and CGI blood's so expensive. Yeah.
Right, and so you're like, oh God, you had access to a lot of money and you bought like an Adobe After Effects package that cost $15. Um, one thing I wanted to ask you
Hmm.
because I've mostly not been able to talk to anybody who knows about Korean TV and film.
Hmm.
So Duna Bay is in this.
Yeah, Peduna.
Or,
Yeah.
or Bayduna, yeah.
Huge star.
I definitely have my own white people dumbness with getting first and last names right in order.
Well, it's Tunabe is correct. It's just in Korean they put the last name first, so I know where it's
Right,
Peduna.
and then
Yeah.
they changed it. So I looked it up and I've looked it up because I've seen her in TV and movies for in American TV movies for a while. But she is usually in Wachowski sisters shit where she does a lot of her own stunts and action sequences, but she's like the most action-free nurse in this show. Is that weird for you? What is your experience with her? Because like for me, I was like, when is she gonna start kicking ass? And it's mostly about her feelings. I was kind of surprised.
Well, I thought it was
I mean, maybe she was
mostly-
excited to get that kind of role, So like,
maybe
not to.
yeah, maybe like I was thinking more it was like a she was flexing her intelligence, her knowledge
Sure.
because yeah, like she's done a lot of action films. I saw the first time I saw her was like in the 90s when she did a sitcom. Like a lot of young Korean actors at the time, like in the 90s, were kind of that was sort of their gateway into it, like starting out
Sure.
in show business. Like they would guest appear on a sitcom and then suddenly they would be on a bunch of TV shows. So I remember seeing her in that and I was like she's got something. Like, and I was young, but I was just like very like drawn. I was like drawn into her. I remembered her name and everything, even though they've had a bunch of, actors come through and I never remember their names, but her name I remembered. And then shortly thereafter I started seeing her in like Park Chan-wook's movies and yeah, like a bunch of other shit. But yeah, she's a very versatile actress. And in this one, yeah, it's very like, I mean, she's in some action, but like it was mostly like whenever they needed a physician, she would be the one, right?
Right.
Like for a pregnant lady, for a person who just got bit in the face and he's the enemy, but we need to rescue him, or just like study the plant and study this disease, like she's the one, right?
Right.
So in that aspect, I was like, okay, this is still an admirable quality in a female character.
Oh, sure. I don't mean
yeah.
to diminish it.
Yeah.
It's just I felt like of all the cast members, she was the most recognizable to an American audience. And
Yes.
it's because she spent 10, 15 years in action TV and movies.
Yeah.
And then for her to go back to this, I would have
Yeah.
thought that would have leaned on her action credentials
yeah.
a little bit. Cause
You would think.
It
But
felt a
yeah.
little bit, like she was like Tom Cruise level, but she got asked to just be the nurse, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
you can make maybe Tom Cruise is better as a nurse, but I thought they could have had her kick more ass.
Yeah. And maybe that is the sexist part, but it's like they were maybe trying to also be historically accurate in some sense. They were thinking like, a woman who is also like, a learned woman in medicine wouldn't know how to like wield a sword very well, like maybe they just kind of put it that way. But and also like if she's out there in the action zone, right, in the fight, then she might die, and it's like they need her. She's the one with all the knowledge, right? And so maybe they needed a protector. I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah, it's fine. I love Peduna though. I think she's remarkable. Like, yeah, I think she's an amazing actress.
Yeah, I guess it was just like then they have like guys like the Tiger Hunter guy who's like constantly on the verge of being murdered, and I'm like, okay,
Always.
he's
And
a
he's
dickbag.
the one that caused this whole fucking mess,
He's for cannibalism.
Yeah.
So like I guess what I'm saying is I totally get what you're saying, but I was like, okay. At what point do you just let dumbass die and let her like pick up a sword and be like, I'm gonna take some lessons. I'm gonna just kind of
Right. Yeah, because he was kind of teaching the civilians like how to shoot a gun and whatnot. Yeah.
Yes. I was
Yeah.
waiting for her to become kind of like a newly anointed warrior.
That
especially-
would have been badass. It's like that scene in Lord of the Rings when when that blonde chick was fighting and like, what is it? One of those evil guys. He's like, "Oh, don't you know no man can't kill me?"
Yes.
Yeah, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm no man," and fucking murders the guy. Seriously. Yeah, you go
Yeah,
off.
the Lich
Yeah.
King. I've been watching The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, where the same woman who plays that character is now like the adopted auntie of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and so I'm dealing
They
with my
always
own.
do that. They always have to put us back in our little domestic spheres.
That's what's so fucking weird is that symmetry of like, yeah, in America and Korea, you just if a woman's kicking ass, you got to go slow down.
Yeah, let's balance this with a little bit of skirts and you making food and shit. Yeah, yeah. Put you next to a kitty cat. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's fine. It's fine. I mean, you know what? Honestly, like as a woman, I do enjoy some of that stuff. I do.
well, sure, and I do think Sabrina's a very female forward show, but like
Right. Yeah.
it's still the role thing. I don't know, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure once you get to be in your late 40s, early 50s, you're like, oh, okay, what about if I had to use less Tiger Balm on my joints while I was shooting my next project?
Exactly.
What if I needed less
Exactly.
bath salts? What if
Yes.
I could just be chill? That would be nice.
Yes, exactly. Because even Pituna now, she's in a lot of Korean dramas too, and she played like a cop or a detective, but it's not very action filled. She's not always like jumping up and down and shit. And another recent TV drama she did was she played like a housewife, like a housewife who's going through a divorce. So yeah, I think maybe she wants to relax.
Maybe she does, and I'm older than her, so I shouldn't talk shit like oh, she's ancient. Maybe she wants to calm down.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you some flashcard questions.
Oh, okay,
All right.
here we go.
So, like, let's say that you're a civilian who was at a local hospital because of, injury or whatever, and you were really hungry, right? But then suddenly, oh my God, out of nowhere, somebody just hands you a bowl of meat soup. But then you find out that the meat you just ate is actually a person. What do you do?
Well, this is a tough one because I'm a lifelong vegetarian. So right away, if I'm in a hospital and I'm handed meat soup, I have to assume we are in either apocalyptic or 14th century Japan, like Korean conflict,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's actually so I basically like through desperation, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this, Grace.
Yeah.
What do I do? I mean, I gag myself immediately. I like to think I wouldn't know that there's virus. How fast am I supposed to answer a flashcard question, Grace?
You just take your time.
Blathering.
Whatever.
I
It's
don't.
fine.
I think I would be horrified already. If am I in a hut like they
Yeah.
were?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's think
Okay.
like the context of the show. Yeah. You're like one of these patients, you're of low class, you've been starving, your village has been starving for a long time. You're very hungry. You don't have the luxury, Dan Telfer, as a vegetarian, all right? Vegetarian's out the window, okay? You are a starving man. You've seen your family die of starvation and you're at a hospital and you've been hungry and this guy hands you a bowl of meat soup and you ate it, but then turns out it was like a 15-year-old kid that you just ate.
Oh, I would for sure still be trying to gag myself. Like this is so gross. Like I've read enough. It doesn't matter what country you're in, what century it is. If you're eating people, shit has broken bad. It is not. It is. There's. I think very few cultures, even back then, that were like, okay, it's all right, it's cool if you got to eat people if you're starving. There was definitely a sense that like you could contract some curse or disease. So
Yeah.
I would do everything I could to get it out of myself. I would be like
Okay.
reaching for a nearby stick to like
Okay.
scrape it out of the inside of my mouth.
Yeah. So bulimia, just barf it out.
100%. I would. Yeah, I'm a very anxious person,
Okay.
terrified of death. I would be trying to. Yeah.
So let's say you're.
You
the
sound disappointed, Grace. I'm sorry. Like,
It's fine.
were you hoping
No,
I would be into it?
I don't know how I would respond in that moment. So your answer is totally acceptable. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So let's say you're the physician's hubby, who's played by Peduna, as we were just talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and you've been working your ass off fighting zombies and trying to find the cure to this illness according to the weather and all that shit, and make sure every single sick person and injured person gets your help, right? And you're exhausted. It's been a long time doing this, but then this goofy ass magistrate guy with gonorrhea asks you to marry him and run away together. What do you do?
God, that character was such a pain in the ass. I would kick him in the dick. Fuck that guy. I would. This is where the fighting comes in. I would just straight up annihilate this guy's junk. Fuck this guy. That guy sucked. He was the epitome of like the classist shit. The fact that he got to stay alive, that he survived so many scenarios where he should have gotten killed. Yeah, he was just. He was like, who is an attractive person who I can look at that will distract me from the horror around me? I really just want to take a vacation. Fuck that guy.
Okay.
I'm a pacifist. I would have beaten the shit out of him.
Okay. All right. So, no thank you. Don't care how
No,
exhausted you are.
hard pass. Hard pass.
Okay, great. Great. All right. So let's say you died of starvation, okay? Let's say you're a dead Dan Telfer. You died of
Sure.
hunger, okay? But suddenly you come back to life and you have consciousness and you find yourself attacking people randomly and eating their flesh. Why do you think you're doing this?
This is tough because, first of all, my girlfriend's dog Ernie is farting nonstop just next to me and is making me question whether or not I'm currently being infected with something. No, the like, what do I? So all I have is like enough sentience left to like guess like what the source of this is.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like doing this like, mechanically. You're like attacking people, eating their flesh, but you have no idea like why do you think you're doing this? What is your rationale?
I mean, first, of course, my first response is thanks for nothing, Barack Hussein Obama. And then my second response is I guess, like, should I go take a bath? What if I get underwater? What if I just super cash take a bath right now? That sounds nice. Is there a nearby hot tub? Is there a babbling brook that I can submerge myself within? I gotta go douse myself. Sure hope it's
Yeah.
not season 1 when it's not acknowledged at all that water will do this, but oh my god.
Okay. Great. All right. That's a great answer.
I hope so because I find all this stuff terrifying. I have very few survival skills. I was just thinking the other day, like I know how to unclog a sink, but I couldn't install one or like if I had to live in the wild, like I don't know what the fuck I would do to go.
Yeah, whether you're in the home or in the wild or if there's a zombie apocalypse, you're like, no, thank you. I'm not fit for any of those.
Right, and I'm already like in this place with the pandemic where I'm like, this is zombie apocalypse as we're gonna get right now. We're living this
This really
shit.
is. We really are kind of living through that era, like lived experience. This is part of our lives. We're going to tell our children and our children's children about this stuff and tell them how much fucking food we ate and how fucking fat we got and how much fucking TV we watched. That is how badass we're going to sound.
That's the hardest part is remembering, and I'm trying to crack jokes. I'm sure it makes me sound ignorant, but it's because I've watched 7,000 shows since I've watched Kingdom. Like that part of my
Yeah.
brain is just soup. Grace, I still feel like I need to go host my open mic this week. I haven't hosted that open mic in
Oh,
a
man.
year.
Dude,
It's. Oh
I
my
loved
God.
that open mic. I really genuinely loved it. And I love that space. And, we're talking about geeky teas and Burbank. And yeah, I missed the whole routine. Like, I went on a hike yesterday with another comic, socially distanced, masked up, safe. And she was like talking about, like, oh, remember that place on Melrose? And I was just like, what is that place? And like even just talking about it like that, like it felt good, you know, just that like we had this point in our memories where like we used to be in the same place together and we used to do this activity together and we had this community, you know, like I was just like, oh, like as much as I miss it, it's like comforting just to be able to talk about it that way.
Yeah, I do think things are going to come back eventually. It's good that people have found a way to stay in touch. I'm really bad at it. I get really nervous. I forget to, but
Hmm.
on the bright side, we are doing things like eating and hiking and trying to take care of ourselves. So yeah, uh,
Yeah,
I'm glad you're taking care of yourself, Grace.
thank you. It's nice talking to you, Dan.
Good talking to you too.
Next week, we're going to talk about the show Something in the Rain, which is an amazing show. It's got Son Ye-jin in it. Yeah, what's not to like? Who doesn't love Son Ye-jin? Raise up hand. Nobody's going to raise their hand because everybody loves Son Ye-jin. Hello. We're going to talk about Something in the Rain next week. And folks, if you haven't already, please follow this podcast on all the social medias. Hello. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. It's there, right? You can even like the page on Facebook. Oh my gosh. Did you know? You can subscribe on YouTube. Yes, you could watch this podcast on YouTube, okay? So it's all there. And if you have questions for me, guys, if you want me to talk about you and your question on this podcast, just email me at kdramaschool@gmail.com, okay? Just email me your questions. I will do my very best to answer them, okay? As always, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all next week.